So, hello everyone, here time of course for my Octopath Traveler 2 review. I was a little late, like 2 weeks or whatever, right? But I only do these reviews, right, when I'm really sure, when I play the whole game, when I've seen all the storylines. So I had to beat the game, right? I played the game for about 80-90 hours now, played the game a lot, all the quests, and I refuse to use Google or so on. So I really beaten the game, I had to figure out everything by myself. It took a while, but I really loved it. This game is amazing. Let me first address this question. Do you have to have played Octopath Traveler 1? You don't have to. There will be asking that question. You don't have to at all. It's just like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy. There are other JRPGs. You can skip over FF 11, 12, and play 15, right, etc. Doesn't really matter. Same thing here. The similarity, of course, are similar jobs, right, similar skills or the same skills, etc. And of course, the general premise. They're playing as 8 characters with different paths connecting together and so on. So that's the same thing, but you don't have to actually play the first game to get the story at all. And also, so here immediately, this game is really good, and it takes everything that made the first game good, right? Everything that was great in the first game, and just makes it better. Like the paths are better, the story is better, the fights are better. It really is an amazing game. I really love this game. Like everything in this game is really good. I have almost no bad things about the game. We're coming to the bad things eventually, I suppose, in the review, but it's mostly almost a perfect JRPG. It's an amazing game, really. So anyway, please subscribe, press the like button, and let's talk about Octopath Traveler 2. Now, let's talk about the premise in the game, right? So as the name it says, right, in about it, you're playing as 8 different main characters. That doesn't mean you're gonna play as one character in the whole game. No, you play as every character actually, right? You start with one character. In my first playthrough, I start with Toro here. As you can see here is Casti. So now I taught to Casti, this will then start her first story bit. So you have the map, right? You can see if you can find them and so on. So it's not a secret where the other character exists in the game world. And now, by interacting with Casti, we can now then start playing as her in level 1 again. So I started playing as Toron, right? Because she's the, the wife of the game. But anyway, that means that she's my main character. You cannot replace her until you beat her whole game with her. What I mean with whole game, I mean her personal storyline, right? So every character has a certain number of chapters, 4 or 5 chapters per character. They have to play it through, right? And you can then pick up any other character, the other 7 character, anytime you want, basically, with your closest one. So here immediately the game has high replay value, because yes, depending on who you start playing as, it's quite different, right? They all have one job each, a unique job per person. And also then, like depending on where they are in the game world, right? So Toron, very, very minor spoiler shape. We have a spoiler later, but very minor spoiler. Right? She starts in the eastern continent of New Delta. That means, of course, that the other character in the western continent will be hard to recruit, right? They're way further away from you. I actually immediately went on a ship and then took the boat over to one of the characters, right? So I actually took me about 20 hours to get all 8 characters. Not because I couldn't get them faster, you can see them on the world I was showing earlier, but more so, right, you can do your quest, maybe some other side quest. There's no like need to run and get all the characters. You kind of just, turn around and so on. And as I said earlier, when you find a new character, you actually become level 1 again. I like it in the game. You become level 1 again. And you can also skip it if you want to, but I would heavily recommend you actually play through, of course, every character's first chapter. But it's good for the second time if you play the game more than once, of course. Then you might want to be able to skip that kind of the first half or so an hour. And honestly, I mean, the game is a lot of replay value and a lot of hours in this game, because just playing like every character's first chapter is probably at least 30 minutes or an hour per character, like 30 minutes at least. And one thing I say immediately in the premise standpoint of the game is that I also died a few times. The game isn't super hard, but I started with Toron and I died in her first boss. So I had to figure out how to use the system correctly and so on. And I was like, man, I died. And I liked it, I liked it playing a roleplay game. And actually, I did it wrong. I have to replay. I have to grind, or I have to unlock the correct skill or something. So the important here is how path works. So every character has 2 different paths. How to interact with NPCs. And I love this system. This is really fun, and especially beginning of the game. So as you can see here now, right, Partio can buy items from this NPC. If you play as Toron instead, you can steal them. If you play as Agna, you can like charm them and so on, right? So there are overlapping action with NPCs, but there are a couple of different ones like summoning, information, and taking their items. And this immediately, I love the system in the beginning of the game. Absolutely. It's good all the way through, but especially in the beginning of the game, we only have a few characters, right? So because you get to a new city, and you get like a mini quest, so how do I... She needs me to find a flower print. It's like, how do I do it? It's like, I can't maybe I have to steal it for someone. And it's like, nah, no one can steal it. You actually need to talk to someone and use the information intel thing to get the information. So you have to return it later with the right, playable character and so on. So it's really, really fun, right? And it's different on night and day too. Everybody has 2 different actions, right? And some NPCs are only there on nights or days. So even if you do have the steal or like the take item ability, but it can all be used on days. Or I need to have a character with a similar ability that is on night instead, and so on. So it's a lot of like replayability, finding new characters, and I think it's just really, really fun. It's just straight up fun because you basically every NPC you meet in a city, right? You want to talk to them, interact with them, try to get your items, try to get some intel from them, try to get some mini quests or whatever, right? So it's so many side stories and side stuff and so on. It is really, really fun, and like I said again, it makes the exploration hilarious, and sometimes you can knock down people, they can block paths for you and so on. Coming to levels later, but that's important, like how do I remove this guy? And lastly, I love this one too because the game has great details, and there's some NPCs, right, that are immune to certain actions, but it's really funny. For example, some merchant guys, they're immune to being theft from, right, because they're a merchant, get the money, so you can't steal items from them, even if you normally could, based on your level, but instead you can charm them with Agnes, because she's a sexy dancer lady, so you can charm them, right, because you can seduce them to get the items. And they can be other guys, like you can't knock down this guy, but you can duel him with Hickory, and so on. So sometimes, even if they have overlapping NPC actions, some NPCs are immune, right, based on what character they are or their storyline or whatever. I think that makes it even funnier, and it's a lot of those nice details in the game. Last on the premise standpoint, talk about a bit of the jobs and so on, right, the gameplay system. So you have every character has a unique job, right, but actually every other character can learn this job later if you find their guild. And it's somewhat similar, right? This game isn't like uniquely with the whole 8 traveler path. For example, in the Saga games, the Saga, not Sega, Saga, right? Also from Square Enix. In these games, you also play 8 different characters, so on, right? But in Octopath Traveler, one thing I find somewhat unique, but is that you actually only play as these 8 characters. Yes, there are some other NPCs you can get for a while and so on, but like in this game here in the Saga, you actually have 8 different characters, and then you can get like another 20 characters in your party, right? And you can also combine with some other characters. So it's a little different, but of course Octopath Traveler, everyone has much more of a storyline and so on, right? And it's more about how you combine those jobs, like, okay, Parcher is a merchant in the beginning, but then you can become merchant thief and so on, right? And like I said earlier, it's more similar to like maybe say Fountain 2, where you have different chapter parts, right, in different order and so on, and the characters are more fleshed out, I suppose. I'm going to talk about this more in detail later, but it's very briefly here again in premise, right? So the game, you fight in the game, the enemies have these shield points, and the key is to break the shield points. They will stun them and take more damage, and also block them for using one of their best abilities. And every character, especially rather every job, right, has different weapons. So see here, this shark, it's against knives, which for example Turon has. So like I hit it with a knife, bam, right, takes 1 shield damage. You can use this BP, battle power, to do more than 1 attack. For example, if you have 1 knife attack, 500 damage, but if you use 1 BP, now you do 2 knife attacks. So controlling your BP, and it's a great part of the game actually, because it makes even if it's a typical turn-based JRPG, the game feels quite engaging, because you have to also control your BPs. The game feels quite like highly paced, and it's very important sometimes to figure out how to break them, what character to use, or really what job to use, right? As I mentioned earlier, everyone has a starting job. For example, then Agnes here is a dancer. She can always only be a dancer, but the secondary job can be acrobatry, dancer, you have to skip the dancer thing, but it can be something else, right? So you can be a dancer hunter, you can be dancer thief and so on, right? So for that matter then, you can have a dancer thief and a thief dancer, which would be the same thing, right? So lastly, talk about latent powers. So the last thing is important then, on the basic premise of this game, is this kind of called latent powers. And here I think the game actually really shines when it comes to the gameplay mechanics, right? I went over that, yeah, your BP, you break them and so on, right? And the jobs. But as everyone can be any job, right? But like I said, you have to combine them, like you have the primary job and secondary job. However, what it really kind of uniquely feels is on the latent powers. So everyone has a special ability for their job, but that isn't so important. It's more this thing is important, latent powers. So latent power then basically is your limit break, like your ultimate or whatever. And this is very unique for every character. So here Turon, she has 2 actions. which is a very good latent power, right? You can do attack, you can heal, whatever. It's just very high utility. Agne has latent power. Any ability you want becomes AoE, air effect, instead of only one enemy or one ally. So for example, if she has a revive, she can revive everyone. So I would say it's actually more on the latent powers, how I think that the character more so uniquely affects their jobs, right? So like I said, for example, Agnes' power to revive people, I think she's a better apothecary than Casti, because Casti is the special, like unique apothecary, but her, the revive heal she has then, can only affect one in your party, right? But Agnes, as that same job, can heal everyone and also save everyone at the same time. Like it feels better. Like for example, Ochette and Casti and so on, they have their own unique special thing. So Ochette, being a beast folk person, a beastling, she can transform into like a werewolf. So I really love this game's level design and also general world design. I mean, straight up, in my opinion, probably the best part of the whole game. So you can see here, there's a new dungeon I find. And every dungeon has so many chests, there's so many items to find, and you can always find, like, you go around in the corners and this thing, and it's always like, well, what do I find here? How do I go to these chests, right? Basically, the game has this 2D world, right? And when you move around in a dungeon, you will always spot like 4 or 5 chests, right? Like behind something or something over there or whatever. Then you as a player have to figure out, okay, how do I get to that chest? Do I have to knock down someone? Do I have to boat something? Do I have to like open in this door? Then I go down here instead. Then I have to, like, maybe it's be nighttime or something. It's always very, very, both in the cities and in every dungeon, it's always like a puzzle game how to find every chest, right? And I just really love it in the game. And when you explore in the game world, right, in beginning especially, you just always have this Octopath Traveler thing, right? You enter a crossroad and it's like 5-6 different paths to go to, and you have no idea where to find it. You're like, oh, where is the chest? Maybe it's an altar over here. Where's the next character? And it's also very easy in the game to walk into 2 strong enemies, right? You go into a path, you're like, oh, here's the 50 enemies. I gotta run away again. And I love this game. I love that this game allows me to do mistakes all the time. I love it that it allows me to go into a level 50 enemies or 60 enemies or whatever, right? Too early. And you can always feel like every area in the game, you can find both chests and so on, new weapons or whatever, right? But also you can find like, oh, here's an altar. An altar gives my special class character a new ability or whatever. Like everywhere in the game world, you will find these small little hidden dungeons. Oh, here's a dungeon in the water, behind the waterfall. You know, the game is like that constantly, and I really, really love these games. Level design, and then general, world design, whatever you call it, right? Because one thing is that it's actually kind of hard in the game to find all the jobs. I love it. Like, I probably played the game for like 30 hours until I had all the 8 jobs. So you have to like find the actual like cleric guild. You have to find the thief guild and so on. Some of them is to find. Some of them are actually like, oh, there's a hidden behind the city in the waterfall over there or something. So every city has secret stuff, not always guilds, but important stuff, right? And every area basically leads either an altar or a guild or something. You have to figure out where you are, right? And again, this game, do not Google it, right? This game is really fun to figure out how stuff works in the game world, yeah. This is what absolutely, like I keep saying, lovable game where you're like, man, I just want to keep playing it. Like, it's the big issue is the game's over. Yeah, it's like, I want to play more of it. It's so fun to find a new world map, a new area, and just explore it and try to find all the different stuff, right? And you know that, okay, I have like 4 out of 8 jobs now. We already ordered 4 jobs. And eventually, you kind of see a pattern. Oh, the jobs and the altar are kind of like this. The weapon and that is kind of like that. So there is some kind of path, I won't spoil it here, but there is some kind of, you can see connecting to it. And then you kind of can look at the map and you sort of figure out, well, okay, so I have this king over here, then the job is probably over there, and because I have this thing there, then I'm assuming that the altar is gonna be over there or something. So you kind of start to like look at the map and like figure out, okay, I haven't been there, and given the map point and given who was in that city, I can probably find an altar if I go north up there, right? Or there's probably a guild next to that altar given this thing or something. So that's really, really fun as well, right? So this game's world building, but world's level, but yes, especially the level design is really, really good. And then I brings me to the quest design. The quest design is a very similar way. So here's the quest. It's very minor spoiler, this is a side quest. To get this girl happy, you have to bring both her parents to her. She has 2 parents, right? And she talks about her parents were fighting, and you can inquire and so on about them, but the way to solve it is you have to figure out that you have to recruit both her parents with 2 characters. You can pick up NPCs, and then you can both be in your party, so you force them to be together, so no need to have a discussion, right? So the game has some really interesting side quests. Now I don't want to spoil that, so I won't go into too many details here. But for example, you have a girl that has cancer or something, terminal illness, and again then, you need to figure out how to get the food she wants. She wants to meet an artist, and she also wants to read a book that isn't written yet, right? So you have to figure out 3 different NPC, combine that and so on. So the game has really interesting quests. Similar to kind of how I talked about the level design, right? Every time you enter a city, you have to, as mentioned earlier, use your path things, right? To talk to people. And for example, these are very minor specific quests, right? But I love quests in the game. For example, you go into a city, and you go into a store in that city. You read like their brains, right? You usually inquire to read what they're thinking about, and they're acting weird. And it's like you can read the different, like, you know, behavior of them, and you can't really figure out why the daughter and the shopkeeper is acting weird. And then I try to like inquire with a woman in the store, and she was really powerful. So if you use Theranos, he can inquire by fighting them, right? So I didn't have the other people with me currently in the game. So okay, let's talk to this woman, and then she talks to this woman, right? And she beats me up. I was like, wow, she's so powerful. Then I was like, something weird here. So I had to run to knock her out instead. And that was the quest. I knocked her out because it actually was some kind of theft. You know, it was actually kind of robbery, right? Because I was like, man, this NPC is so powerful. It's something weird with this NPC. What if I knock her out instead? Yeah, then I saved the shopkeeper from this robbery, right? From the crazy woman, right? Sorry for the minor spoiler, but you know, it's a very minor side quest. But the game is filled with quests like this. We have to figure out, okay, who are his parents and what is thing, and you have to like remember. And I love in the game that you travel down this game and you see different cities, right? And you get to different areas and so on. You have to always remember. I mean, I love it in the game. I keep saying, but I love it. I really love it. And I enter a city, right? And I talk to people, NPCs, and I remember that, oh, someone in the other continent, they wanted this item. They wanted like a star ruby. Someone wanted a mirror, and like all this stuff is back in my head, right? Because a lot of NPCs will give you quests that you can't solve right now, either because you lack the correct character, right? Because you don't have all the 8 characters in the beginning of the game, and it, as I mentioned, it takes like 20 hours to get all the characters, right? So you don't have all the characters. Maybe too low level even. Sometimes it's like you don't have the level to be able to steal something or knock them out or whatever, right? So you lack the level to do it. Or it's something like you don't have the correct, you know, skill or whatever, or the correct something. So you're all in the back of your head, right? So it's really fun. And for that matter too, just to point out, many quests in this game, I have done them before I get the quest right. For example, the shark quest, I beat the shark first, then I get the guy who wants the shark, right? I think it's great in the game too, that talking about the combination of quest design and world design, that you can actually do most of the quests in the game before you actually get the quest right. So there's no limit. For example, before I had the cleric guild, so actually the cleric job, I actually had the cleric like item to get level 2 clerics. So basically, I found a dungeon they want me to go to before I got the quest to go to the dungeon, right? But the game allows that, right? The game allows to go in there, beat this bonus boss, get the item, and then 10 hours later, I find the guild, and now I get level 2 immediately, right? And I love that the game allows you to do mistakes, or rather than discover your own path, right? So the game feels very fresh, very inside. So yeah, speaking, I love the level design, the world building kind of design, and the quest design, massively so. And it's really fun to try to solve all the different, you know, inquiries. What do they mean here? Or it's very cryptic, right? That being said, though, sometimes the game is frustrating, I have to admit. When it's like, oh, I needed to bring this person. I need to like recruit them and bring them to this person. That wasn't very clear and so on. Sometimes it does feel a little puzzle guessing game where you're like, I try to backstaff them, I try to inquire them. I guess I recruit them and then I bring them over here. Maybe that works. It is a little bit like, sometimes you get a little bit like, what am I supposed to do here? When you're playing the main story in the game, it's very clear. This is the main story part. So now it's very obvious. You have to use the current main character to, you know, keep going on, right? But some of the side quests can sometimes be very cryptic. But again, I love it, you know. 9 out of 10 times I love it. But sometimes a little bit like, I have no idea what to do here. And it's like, I talk to everyone. Okay, I finally did it. Talk to everyone in the city. So about the graphics and the music of the game. It's just really good looking, right? 2.5D. it looks like the perfect kind of the dream, right, of a JRPG SNES fan, you know? Like the graphics are beautiful, the rain, the effect, the water, the music, it's just all 10 out of 10. If you love this, like, you know, retro feel to it, like retro perfect pixel graphics, this is like the wet dream, right? It's beautiful, it's beautiful. Like the game just looks amazing. The depth of it is great. And like I said earlier, the level design, right, how the hiding items and so on, definitely works out better because of the depth to the half D and so on. But it's just like a beautiful effective game. Yeah, it's hard to. It basically again feels like I'm playing a Super Nintendo game, right? But the graphics are like 10 times better than they were back in the days, something like that. And it's just amazing, right? Okay, let's talk about the gameplay, the actual combat design, right? If you have seen my videos before, you might know I worked with several games, right? But especially I work with combat designs. By the way, I would say my specialty. If anything, I'm a combat game designer, right? I would say so myself at least. But so I care about it a lot, right? So anyway, as you can see here in the game, then, right? We have all the characters and pilots and so on. So everyone has their own primary job first, right? So yes, one is a thief. Then what you can do in the game is you can pick any other job, of course, unlocked here. Very minor spoiler, whatever it is the jobs are there. So I can be a scholar with her. I can be, apothecary and so on, right? And then she will be that role. And the first thing that's important at the beginning of the game with the jobs is that every job, right, has a certain number of items they can use. So you can see here, if I'm a hunter, if I'm a thief hunter, I can use sword, dagger, axe, and bow, right? That's important because every enemy has an own weakness, right? Talked about earlier very briefly, right? But every enemy has a shield thing, and to break that shield, you need to use the weapon or the magic element to weak against, right? So for example then, right, if I start as a thief, I'm only a thief with her, I can only use sword and daggers. And if I face an enemy that's only weak against pole arm and fire magic, this is quite bad, right? I can't break his armor. So for example, if I'm a warrior, if I'm a thief warrior, now I can use pole arm as well, right? So you have to think about that. So that I like in the game, right? So in the beginning of the game, you only have a few jobs, and then you find more jobs, and you're like, oh, I can combine this thing and so on, right? So that's very intriguing. The further you get into the game, kind of the mid part of the game, right? Where you have, let's say, 4 or 5 jobs. Now you're like, oh, how can I combine the best thing? And same thing with the characters, right? So when you start picking up the other characters, they have their own, again, right, primary job. And the same thing there, you're like, okay, I have 6 characters now. Who is best to use? Because Agnes, she got like wind magic. Dancer got natural wind magic. Oh, he's like cleric. He got like lightning magic, light magic. I mean, light, not lightning. Scholar got lightning and fire, right? So think about that as well and so on. So that's very interesting in the game. I like it in the game, right? And furthermore, then, of course, every job has different skills, right? You can unlock them, and by unlocking skills, you also get like permanent passive skills you can buy, and then of course you fight in the game. So the game has random encounters. I haven't talked about earlier, but yeah, the game has random encounters. It's a very classic game, yeah. But anyway, let's go into the battle. As you can see now, right, I have to break this enemy with either axe, bow, or wind magic. Right? Now I'm playing this specific job here with thrown, so I can use axe. Right? If I had a normal thief, I wouldn't have an axe, so I wouldn't be able to break the enemy. Yeah. If I was just playing basic thief here, I would have none of these 2 weapons, right? So for example, at the beginning of the game, you will have Agnes, right? Because she has wind magic, so you can kill that thing, right? But now I have another job, and same thing here. He's a warrior hickory in the beginning, so he will have like sword pole on this thing, but I have bow with him, so I can also break it, right? And if you break the enemy, then they lose their shield and ability and so on. So if we break it here, I might kill it now then. Before now it's not good. So now it's stunned, right? So now, the enemy loses 1 turn, and the important part, and this is a huge part of the game, is that when you stun them by breaking them, you block them from using their abilities. So every boss is basically in the game gonna have like, oh, he's getting angry, and you need to stop them before that, right? And I really love this in the game because the thing is that sometimes you just wanna use your BP, right, your battle power, to do the maximum damage immediately, or utilize the break or whatever. But other times in bosses, you wanna retain the BP and wait for it, or next turn I gotta break them again and so on. So yes, it feels quite dynamic. So how the BP works out is that I can now use my BP here on Temanos. He will do 2 attacks now, right? So if I said I wanna break this enemy over here, he's a magic guy, so it'll be good for him, but I can do more damage now, right? So instead of doing, I can do 2 damage here, bam, right, it dies. And now if I break this guy, right, I can now use Throne with 1 axe, 1 break, right? Or my BP, bam, bam, bam. This is 3 axes, bam, 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 right? There's 3 cheat points. So the game's dynamic, like I said, I really enjoy it because either use your BP, right, to get 1 BP per turn to attack them hard, right? Oh no, we can now, I can do it now. Or you should just save it for the current moment, or maybe for a healer, I want to save it later, this thing and so on. And if you use your BP, your battle attack, you won't get 1 point the next turn. So you want to save that matter as well, right? And as I mentioned earlier, right, you have your latent power, and that also really affects differently. So you also might sometimes you want to combine your BP with your latent power, that you want to save it for later, right? So it's a lot of the game actually feels quite dynamic. I think the people compare it to a puzzle game, like every boss is a puzzle game. So for example, many of the bosses in the game, they will actually summon guys in front of them, which will remove their weakness until you defeat the enemies, right? So now you need to think about how do I do this thing. Maybe the boss will counter when you AoE, so you have to do this thing before. So yeah, every fight is a puzzle game, and you have to kind of overcome it, right? So I really do enjoy system in that sense, absolutely. And of course, if you had a job and so on, you get your skills, you can think about different skills you can unlock. So for example, a tip here, right? Deal more damage, probably the best skill in the game from Warrior, because you can then limit break override, like in most dropping games, you can do more damage now. So for example, I'm not playing a Warrior, I've never been a Warrior with Ochette, but I have maximized her Warrior skill, right? I could unlock that passive. So that, I mean, it's not anything new in this game, of course, but I like to right? I mean, so again, I never actually played as Warrior with her. If you mentioned a Warrior, I've never been a Warrior with her then, right? But as you can see here, I have all the skills at the last one because I really wanted that passive, right? So again, I think it's interesting. And if you play some of the special classes, you can also learn their passives or whatever, the Arm Master, Silent Spoiler, whatever. I mean, these classes, right? And they have some other unique requirements, etc. But they also do have their own unique skill, though. But like I said earlier, I think the most Latent Powers, well, her teeth is like, I can disguise myself on the character, or I can use this dark magic or whatever. But I think, as I said, I keep saying, it's a Latent Power, like doubling your turn, or yeah, if you go to a fight again here with Throne, she can do like a double attack, or double turn rather, which is much better, right? That's more so where I feel that the unique class thing, or unique job thing, whatever, feels more different. So for example, Hikari here, he's a special ability, his own like bloodline ability, kind of meh. Ochette has her earlier, werewolf power, but only Throne power like that. So now I will take 2 turns to right. This of course gives a lot of utility. I can heal, I can use an item, I can save someone, maybe I can revive someone. What I've simply used to do with on boss is I have used armor down the boss fight. And then the next turn, you know, my turn again, I have 2 turns. Now I will use my attack ability. For example, with the basic combo. So sort of that happening in this game. And what can I say here? I think that I like how the power works. I think it's interesting. One thing I haven't come into yet is how some characters though also have their own unique abilities. And this is I like in the game a lot, but I do have to say I feel there's one issue in the game here. That is that some of the characters does feel way more interesting. That make any sense? I can show what I mean here. So for example, here we go. Telenos, he's a cleric. He doesn't have any really special abilities as a cleric. Right? He has little power and so on, but there's no special like I am a cleric, I can do this thing. He just has his power and he has his weakness in dark. Throne in the same way, she will buff you when you start a fight on the evening, which is very, very good, don't get me wrong. Throne arguably has the best ability though, because it's like everyone gets a buff if it's evening. But, for example, Hikari, he can learn abilities from NPCs, which some of them are really, really powerful. So that's one thing that's very good, right? And even more so, Ochette, she can capture monsters like Pokemon, and now she can summon the monsters, right? Which they have incredibly good effects, especially early game. Capturing some monsters that are way, way high level than you are is incredibly potent, right? So I love it in the sense that I love that Ochette has like, oh, I can, you know, capture monsters. I love that Hikari has, oh, I can like learn NPC abilities, and it's very, very powerful. Don't get me wrong, it's good. But the issue I have with it, honestly, is that I mean, I still love the game, of course, nitpicky here, but I do wish that the other characters would have the same thing, you know what I mean? It feels weird to me in the sense that I'm playing as, in my first playthrough, Throne, right? The Thief Lady, in my first playthrough, as my main character, the first character I play, and she has none of these abilities, right? So for her, I can't capture enemies, I can't learn enemies, so it's like half the character have their own, like, unique ability tree. For example, then Casti has her healing, mixing item and so on, right? Which is very, very OP, certainly some sensitivity. And like I said, Ochette summoning monsters is incredibly powerful, especially early game. Extremely powerful, because you can capture monsters that are much stronger than you are in the beginning of the game, and they can like one-shot enemies. So it does feel weird to me. I wish everyone had something like this. So like I mentioned, Throne instead buffs you. That being said, at the last boss in the game, and most bosses, Throne's ability is probably actually the best one. Basically, you start the fight, if it's night, with a lot of buffs on you, and Telenos instead makes the enemy has debuffs on them. So if it's night, so if it's them together, I usually play with them together, right? It's an evening, it's very good. But still, though, if it's the weird, so I like that they have this like unique system, right, per character, or rather, for the character to have a unique system. I love that. I just wish that everyone had it. It's a nitpicky, but it's the weird to me that why didn't all 8 have their own, you know, unique flair or something like that? Yeah, because definitely playing with Ochette and Hikari and so on feels more unique than playing as Throne, right? So for example, if I recommend you to start a character, Hikari, for example, I think is a good first character to start with, because then you can get the skills right from all the NPCs in the cities, which feels more interesting, or Ochette then, you can capture monsters. So in my playthrough, Ochette was the first one I basically got, my first playthrough. Ochette was the first one I got after Throne, her and Agne. So I had Ochette almost since the beginning of the whole game. So I captured monsters the whole game, right? Like from the beginning and get new monsters and so on. And that felt really good, right? And I think I would recommend, again, start probably with her or Hikari or something similar, where you feel like I am also playing this Pokemon game, right? When I'm also, but I'm also leveling up. I'm also capturing different element monsters and I get different skills and so on. So I do think that's a little weird in the game, because some characters clearly feel more interested to play with because they have all these unique abilities, right? But overall, though, I think it's a really good system, though. And combine different jobs. I mean, it's classic. I mean, I played FF3, FF5, FF3, you know what I mean? Combine different classes, different jobs or whatever. It's a good system, right? Different passives, combination and so on. Or like I mentioned, just becoming a warrior used to learn the maximum warrior passive, but actually playing as a hunter, but I just want the passive. All the stuff is good gameplay, right? So all in all, I think it's a really good gameplay. And like I said, just to say it again, the whole breaking pointing is very dynamic. Yeah, the whole breaking the enemies, breaking them, combining that, it feels very engaging. This actually is one of the, I think, more engaging turn-based JRPGs I've played in a while. We have to like think about, how should I break it? Should I change character? Should I have this magic ready? Should I have this wind magic? Should I use my element magic? Should I use this thing? Should I buff me with the fire sword? Should I use this thing? So on. So overall, it is a really good gameplay. Okay, so I want to talk about the story now, right? And of course, I'm gonna make one part here, generally talk about the story, and then we have a spoiler part. So let's talk about the general story premise here. So the story, of course, is structured that you're following each character, right? As mentioned earlier, first you play their first chapter, which kind of shows you their basic premise. Throne wants to be free, right, from her evil, like, criminal, I guess, organization. It's very all the twists in her storyline. And Hikari is betrayed, right, by his brother and his warting and so on. So that's kind of the premise, right? And like I said earlier, I like how the game gives you a pretty good, like, likable main character, whoever you play as, and all into the storylines. Now, without going into spoilers here, I want to explain, I guess, that each story is quite different. So like in the game, like for example, Patetio or Parsha, whatever his name, he's voiced by none other than, of course, Sorrow, Kazuya, and yeah, best voiced in the game easily. He's a merchant. And his storyline is like, you gotta run and buying stuff, yeah. And Agen's storyline is she's a dancer. And she wants to be a famous star as a mother. She goes around trying to become famous, right? I'm being very brief here, of course. It's, of course, much more complicated than that, but you get my point. That's trying to spoil here. Oswald is probably the one that is most, like, straightforward, the classic storyline. He starts in a prison, being betrayed by his best friend, framing him for the murder of his wife and daughter. And again, just a spoiler, this isn't a spoiler because it's basically the first minute of the game. If you start with Oswald, the first second is like he's in prison, right? So this is not really spoilers. And he has to, get revenge, right? So very, very straight. He has probably, I would say, the most straightforward storyline. Yeah, like again, betrayed by his best friend, dead daughter and wife, wants revenge. Yeah, very, very straightforward. Similar, Casti has no memory of who she is, and everyone hates her, and she's like, why do people hate me for, right? I gotta figure that. Also pretty, I would say, basic RPG storyline. There's a mixture of these storylines, right? And I think all of them are pretty good, but without getting the spoilers coming this soon here, I will say that I feel some of them are really good. And to be honest though, this is probably my biggest issue with the game, is that some of the storylines are a little bit like, well, that doesn't make any sense. These are a few characters, talking about Core in this spoiler bit, where I'm just like, okay, this is like plot hole. That doesn't make any sense. But generally speaking, I think they are good. And the issue though, probably the bigger issue, that of course I am not third person to say, is that how do these storylines connect with the other characters, right? So the way the game works is that after you have beaten one chapter, a full chapter of a character, and another one, you will unlock these like crossover storylines with two characters each. So those kind of make the character have more dynamic with each other, right? And all of those cross thing leads into the last chapter in the game, so that's kind of important. Obviously, there is like an entwined storyline, generally speaking, right? I won't say what it is, but it's pretty clear that what you'd meet in, like the boss in one chapter is somehow involved in the other chapter, and etc. and so on, right? And I think one issue here, honestly, the two issues here, generally speaking, one issue is that some of these storylines, especially, I say it's a very minor spoiler, especially Partio, the merchant, again, best voice actor, my Sorrow, my man, right? But his storyline, even I beat it in the game, I'm just like, that didn't make much sense to the general storyline. Like, his storyline feels honestly quite irrelevant for the other character. He goes around and he's fighting his evil uncle with merchants and trying to buy a steam engine, and you're like, it has nothing to do with the main storyline. Like, honestly, it doesn't. Like, nothing that ever happens in the storyline generally feels like it has something to do with the evil powers at all. And similarly, there's some other characters, like I think especially Terranos, especially him, and also Ochette, their storylines feels way more relevant, okay? I'm not gonna spoil, of course, here, but they're way more relevant. I feel like you play his storyline, it's very, very clear how this thing connects to the major evil thing. Ochette is probably straightforward, the most like, okay, this is the main evil, right? Yeah, her storyline, you immediately learn about like the big evil thing, the main antagonist, right? And when you play as Oswald, that also kind of comes back to those two. So there's some characters will feel very heavily entwined, without even like talking to each other. They feel entwined because the bad guys are clearly like, cooperating with each other, right? They're clearly the same bad guys together. Where, yeah, some other characters, you're kind of like, I don't really understand how this comes back to the other characters. So that's one issue. It's not a big issue, but I do feel that especially some of the storylines are like, I don't understand how this relates back to the other characters at all, really. Secondly, though, which is probably a bigger issue that I'm not breaking the ground on, is that it does feel a little weird how the characters do have this banter. They will talk to each other. You can basically get these banter scenes between them in the party, and they will like reflect what's happening to you. Like, oh, your daughter is dead, I feel sympathy, and they talk about that, right? Or, oh, you were nice to him and so on. I like this part, definitely. They're all optional, you can skip them if you want to, but it basically means that the people you have in your party with you, so you play several as Toro 1, right? And then you have, let's say, Ochette. She will comment, oh, was that your mom? And blah, 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 and so on. They talk about what happened with the last boss or some event in a town or whatever. So that gives you a pretty good feeling of who they feel about you and so on, right? Or what's happening in your storyline. So that's nice. But I think one thing with the game does, and it feels a little bit of a budget thing, is that basically when you encounter a boss or like a story bit or whatever, which happened to the one then, as you can see in this scene here, no other character is in this scene, right? Imagine if my party members, when I did this boss here, I was playing with Ochette, Terranos, and Agni. Imagine these three characters like standing on the hill, like behind me, right? Standing kind of like either there or maybe standing on the stairs there. They were standing there being all like, oh, this is sad, you know, whatever, and maybe just crying or something. That would have done so much more, right? I think that is, yeah, like the issue is that they don't really show up in the other cutscenes, and instead you always have some other, you know, NPCs, right, that part of your storyline. But I think it would help a lot if you saw the other characters, depending on your party, right, just being with you, maybe having some cutscene next to you, maybe dropping some lines, right, even if you're a character. So I think it's mostly a bud issue, right, because that would mean that they have to write dialogue and voice act and so on, you know, different scenes, because you can, of course, control your party, right. You would have to basically write like 4 or 5 lines per person, you know, per other scene or whatever. So it would be a lot more work, but I think that is the issue that a lot of people feel in this game. Is like, you don't really feel that the other characters are part of your storyline. But if they were more involved, not again actually chasing the storyline, but just like, you know, being there, maybe dropping some lines, you know, maybe confronting your evil mom or whatever, like, you know what I mean? I think that would have helped a lot, right? But generally speaking, not to be too negative here, I do think that each storyline is good by itself, though. So what I said right now, it's true. I do feel we should have a little more of like the other characters interacting and so on. But at the same time, almost every storyline, you know, like the individual chapters are very interesting. I like how they're presented. I like the characters. A lot of likable characters, right? A lot of dislikable bad guys, you know what I mean? So I do like the storyline. Like Turon has a very good interesting twist, right? The good twists, the good build-ups. And generally speaking, again, without spoiling here, the game is very dark. Yeah, oh my god, this game is like nightmare fuel. It's like every character is evil, everything is bad, everything is betrayed. It's like, it's so much bad characters, there's so much death and decay. It's a very grim game, seriously. Every storyline has so many grim realization, right? And I think, generally speaking, because the big bad and most of the bad guys are using, you know, like evil magic power and, you know, basically typical corruption magic, right? It also means that a lot of enemies are literally nightmare fuel, as I said, right? Where, you know, this boss is like a human transformed into a monster or whatever, or this thing is that thing, and this thing is fueled by, you know, blood or something. It's a lot of that. It's very, very dark, certainly. That being said, is it predictable or not? I think that some of the elements are quite predictable. For example, I could guess Oswald's storyline almost immediately. I mean, some of them are very, like, as I mentioned earlier, Oswald, Terranos and so on, Ochette, they are very, like, straightforward, right, JRPG storylines. And some other ones like Agni, like, oh, I want to be a dancer, that one is just like, I could guess her. No, I did guess exactly who her enemy was gonna be as post though. I did actually do that, but still, it's kind of like a weird storyline. And partially also like, oh, it's a Mercer happening here. So I mean, they're good, but they also, of course, have a little bit of the typical JRPG flair to it. You kind of feel what's gonna happen. But anyway, that's kind of general premise. I'm talking about some of the spoilers. Let's go into another bit here and, you know, actually talk about some spoilers. Spoiler warnings then, story spoilers. Okay, so let's talk about story spoilers. Right? I just didn't rant now. I'll be like, oh my god, this makes no sense. This made no sense, okay? Tyrone's backstory, her mom also, is it like also, do they have the same dad? It is a weird storyline, right? As you might have seen, right, I mentioned earlier, Tyrone was my first main character, also the first character I finished the storyline with Cloud, right? And I can't be the only one, and I say it immediately. I love this game, but yeah, Tyrone's storyline is the worst. Yeah, I played the worst main character. It's like, this storyline makes no sense, man. Her storyline has made no sense, guys. I was just like, why? Okay, so her father. I like the twist that wasn't the father, but it's a big issue that Claude isn't displayed at all, really, in her storyline. And then, of course, when you beat the game, right, or you beat all the storylines, and you meet the real bad guy and so on, that also doesn't really further explain Claude, right? So that was a big issue in the game, yeah. Her storyline doesn't make any sense. So anyway, that's Tyrone. I would say she's the worst storyline straight. I stop with that. I guess the Bubba Horn had the worst storyline. Hikari's storyline, I liked, you know, his storyline is pretty interesting. It's a classic, you know, evil brother, Mugen, right? His evil, like, you know, half-brother with another bloodline. Hikari then having part of the good, holy bloodline, right? He can control his evil spirit, betray his father and so on. Yeah, I think he had a good storyline. It was kind of, how to say it, classic, right? You know, evil empire and so on. Yeah, pretty straightforward. But the T storyline, I like. He's a very likable character. He's obviously voiced by, again, Kazunaka Zoro. I love his storyline. If I replay the game a third time, I probably would play with Partio. I play with him a lot, yeah. The merchant is, as a class, interesting as well. But as I mentioned in the non-spoiler part, maybe it's a spoiler there, but still, his storyline, while interesting, and I like him, I like Alpha, and I like Uri, coming to the reveal soon. His storyline just had no purpose in the general. He has the least connected storyline. Yeah, like obviously Uri, she connects it back into the main plot, right? But yeah, his storyline was just like, okay, like yeah, it was good. I mean, that's it. He had a good storyline by itself, but it really didn't matter for the storyline at all in the bold storyline. That's kind of weird. Definitely. Ochette, also voiced of course by an awesome voice of Hirano, Lucy and so on. Yeah, she was awesome. I love everything. She's likable. I love everything with Ochette. She's adorable. And her storyline is probably arguably the best one from a straight up standpoint, right? It's probably the most, it's like, oh, I'm gonna capture these 3 monsters and fight this thing, and the beast folk, and like the war between the beast folk, the beast people, and the humans. And then, as you can of course do the NPC quest afterwards, I love the major, the evil humans, so to speak, right? The redemption, and oh no, the beastlings, they have no evil, and so on. So I like that. That whole thing was really good, definitely. And you know, the egg thing, and yeah, I think Ochette has the best storyline. Like, you know, destroying the poor egg and so on. Yeah, she has the best storyline, I would say, even though it's kind of iconic. And also, as I mentioned earlier, her storyline really kind of connects, right, more or less straightforward to the main bad guy. And I think more characters should have like straight up, here's my journey to fight the main evil, right? After all, one of her enemies is a dark hunter, is mentioned a lot in her storyline, and then obviously turns into the weird dragon dark thing later on, right? And that also was really good. So she even has like a bad guy that is later on than a boss and so on, right? In the collective storyline. Where, for example, Partio doesn't have his main bad guy, he's just over, right? Yeah, he doesn't have any like leaping into it. I guess again, I know, but still, Ochette is probably the best written storyline, the best collective. Oswald, as I mentioned, I figured out immediately that his daughter and his wife was gonna be the monsters. I was like, I see FMA, you know. I was like, he Full Metal Alchemist him. I was like, of course his wife is the monster. I guess immediately, as soon as I saw a Chimera, I was like, oh yeah, Chimera. Oh, okay, I've seen FMA. I know what's happening here. I was like, oh yeah, he's tuckering him. His storyline, in my opinion, was very obvious. Honestly, yeah, I guessed very early that his family was going to be alive and used in an experiment. I don't know. I predicted his whole storyline basically from the beginning. Like straight up. Agnes' storyline, I mean, it's good. I really like her storyline because she has one of the cute, you know, like side story. Like, oh, I'm just gonna be a dancer. Doesn't feel like it's super relevant, but she's a really likable character. And I think her storyline is, you know, this feels like a really good, like, main storyline that hasn't really to do, but it's just cute. But, however, though, yes, her storyline also is kind of like, feels very offset, right, from the general premise. Or she beats her mom's disciple, kind of like her older sister kind of thing, right? Defeats her, saves the village, but has no relevance. I mean, I was waiting for Dolcinecca, whatever her name is pronounced, Dolinecca. I was expecting her to somehow also be part of the Shadows, right? I expected her to be like maybe working, you know, for the evil bad girl, something like that, but she didn't do that. So I think there's a little bit lag in the game. I think it would be better if she also was somehow involved with the Shadows, right? She was a believer or something. Because now it just ends up with Agni having again, her storyline by herself I think is really good. Again, I love her storyline by herself, right? But how does it connect to the main storyline? So there's a little issue in the game, right, that you feel like, okay, but this was a really good, single storyline. But it didn't even go back to at all how then they do with the main storyline. That's kind of weird, right? Then they connect with her and Hikari, but not really. More left, Casti's storyline. Yeah, Casti's storyline is good. Casti's storyline I think is that it's kind of what Agnes would have needed more, right? Where, of course, her eventual amnesia enemy turns out to be working with the Shadows, and has a bit of Claude, right, with Toron, but that really could have been explained better. I think Claude, sorry we're talking about Toron, that her father Claude is the biggest issue of the game's plotline, right, and he was the one that made custody storyline happened, right, so to speak. So that really could have been explained better. What happened there? How was that involved? That unfortunately, I think again, Claude is the biggest in the game, right? Terra no storyline. He has also a good storyline, one of the best ones, right? Straightforward. That his storyline says, someone's evil in the church, someone is killing the pontiff. Who did it? Or it has to be some devil worshippers. What can I do, right? Yeah, his storyline is very connected to the main storyline, and it follows suit, right? Yeah, so I think that's a very good storyline. I think that's all right. I hope I didn't miss that one there. 8 characters. Lastly, of course, we get the final ending, right? Everyone together. That Ori was evil, yeah, that was a good twist though, okay? Don't get me wrong. That Partio didn't really connect into the main storyline. I think that was bad. But then he's like bestie, right? Or more or less, the cute little girl. She's actually super evil. Like, what? That was the best twist. Yeah, that Ori is pure evil, man. That was the best twist in the game, man. That other character, like for example, that what's called the Eagle of Q, his whole thing. That wasn't like, I mean, it was a twist, but I mean, he was always a very suspicious bad guy, yeah. The Eagle of Q, his whole thing was that, I lie and I manipulate so on. I liked that he was behind Mugen's story as well, though, so that was good. Ubero coming into that was good, and you read his note and so on. So it's good foreshadowing that you find his notes at the one of Hikari. But still, he was a suspicious guy from the beginning, right? So that Uri was traitor, that was really good. That Kusan's traitor, I was like, whatever, sure he could betray me, right? That wasn't bad. I mean, it just made sense, he betrayed me. And then of course we have the whole Terranos thing. But there I have an issue with the game, though, honestly. I mean, again, I love this game, I think it is an incredibly good game, but the storyline is really good. I mean, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I really love some of the side quests, right? I love some of the storylines. But I do feel a little bit issue of like, you can scrutinize her, You can talk to her, the bad guys. And I think that the game would have been slightly better in the end of the game if there were more implication, right? That, for example, Uri was evil. It was more implication that that cute nun girl is actually like Satan or something. Yeah, like I think that she should be immune to be. I know there are some hints to it. Like if you fight her, she will say different stuff in provoking and so on. But I still think the game could have done it better, right? Maybe she could have been immune to scrutinize her. Maybe if you did scrutinize her, you get something weird, right? I think honestly, something more in the game could be done there to hint that she's different. Not explain to you in your face, but and also generally the pontiff's hint that who's the betrayer could have been. I don't know, but it is a little strange that basically when you get to the last chapter, right, everyone you know is an evil traitor. Everyone has like a childhood enemy apparently, and yeah, it wasn't really enough, I would say, hints to some of them. Like I said, Kusan being evil, that makes sense, because he's like a weird, manipulated person, right? That Uri's evil, I think, is good, because her whole storyline that she was pretending to be this cute little girl, right? So that she betrayed you makes sense, because her whole thing was just a master manipulator. So that works out. But the nun being evil was a little bit like, yeah, okay, that just come out of nowhere. That really came out of nowhere. What do you guys think? But generally, though, I did like the whole premise of the shadows, connects back to it. I just wish that, like I said, I do think that almost everyone has a very good, like, single, contained story, except Throne, that has the worst one. With Claw, that is bad. Yeah, I don't get it, and it's never explained in the full story either. And I think the problem with her too is that, if I just play Parch storyline, it's a self-contained story, right? If I just play, etc., like they have a self-contained storyline, but her storyline with your parent is actually this god guy, that you defeat him, nothing is explained. Yeah, she has like the least self-contained storyline, and her father is very important for the bad guys, and he's mentioned by the bad guys like several times in the end of the game, but no one ever explains really what it means, right, and how he could be immortal, so on, in a good way, or if they were working with him and so on. So it just feels weird. It feels really weird. Yeah, that she has a weaker storyline. But overall, I think the game has a good storyline. And I think the end boss is interesting and how everything's come back to it. That being said, I mean, I played this game before in my life, so obviously I figured out that the evil god was gonna be the bad guy. Come on, we all know that, right? we know that the evil god is gonna come back and be the bad guy. And I don't think that's an issue. I mean, I played JRPGs, I played several hundred JRPGs, so I don't mind that the last bad guy is like super god form or whatever. The super god form is always, I mean, every JRPG you need to fight an evil god eventually, come on. So there's no shock there, right? That you have to combine all the 8 characters fighting the evil bad guy. Unova, Sephiroth, Angel, Wing Angel form, come on, that's how it is, right? But anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't played the game, absolutely recommend it. Now, of course, we're at the end here, so we're gonna show some spoilers here, right? But absolutely recommend this game. That being said, if you look at this part here, I don't think it's very spoilery staring at the evil bad guy, right? But anyway, I really love this game. I think it's one of the best JRPGs I've played in a long time, right? It really captured the soul of so many JRPGs. I think, as I mentioned earlier, though, for me, the best part really is the level design, honestly. I mean, it's many good parts in this game, but the level design, as I mentioned, that you're talking to all the NPCs, they're all really good cryptic side quests, and just exploring every little nook of the city. It's so good, man. The game is so addictive. Give me that, one more turn feel to it in the JRPG. One more chest. How do I get there? How do I open this thing? So I really enjoyed the game, and the storyline is probably the weakest part. Even though, again, I really love some story bits, right? Like Uri being traitor, that was really good, yeah. But like I said, the evil nun was like, there's no build up for this at all. Uri at least was very involved in the storyline too with party, yeah. She was very involved. The nun used AFK the whole game and was maybe trying to seduce the guy. Tell us, I think she was in love with him or something, maybe, but she actually was the bad guy. Yeah, it felt out of nowhere. You were like, okay, she's actually the main evil leader. I mean, the Dark Hunter was never shown until she died, basically, but she was always, talked about in the storyline. So that's how it worked out, but yeah, that was out of nowhere. Some of the storyline bits made no sense, but mostly it's like an 8 out of 10 maybe in the storyline. It's more like, honestly, I think the story is 10 out of 10, except some parts, like Claw, it's like 0 out of 10. You're like, what is this? Yeah, unfortunately, there is some really downers there, but generally a good storyline. Anyway, please subscribe, step it, and have a great day.